so Good Grief came to me because, as you all know, I started this company because of the loss of my father to cancer. And I like to think, I mean, listen, I am hardly perfect, but I would like to think that I have worked through the loss pretty well, and I did find something really, really good out of it, and that's sincerely this jewelry brand. So I wanted to start this as a way to sort of inspire my community, because what I've noticed over the last year is that the most response that I get from you guys is when I do post about my personal experience with loss and things like that. I get a lot of messages, a lot of questions. I've built friendships on here where people will message me, you know, for anniversaries and birthdays and things like that of people that they've lost, and sort of, you know, ask me for guidance or just sort of talk to me about it, which I love, because it means that Sincerely is doing what it's meant to do, which is not just provide, you know, diamonds and jewelry to all of you, but really to have built this community where we can all celebrate the people that we love. So that's where Good Grief comes from. I want a platform for stories to be shared where people who have experienced grief, and again, like, grief comes in all different shapes, forms, sizes, colors, you name it. It doesn't mean you lost a person. It doesn't mean somebody passed away. In my case, that's what it is. I'm sure right now a lot of people are grieving just their livelihood. COVID has taken that away from us. So people are grieving, you know, their friendships, their social lives. Okay, one sec. Mimi wants to join. Hold on. Let's see if this works. Oh,
Oh,
hey! Did
sorry,
you
hold on. I did not mean to go live.
pulling you out? See? Technical issues already. That means we're doing something right. Yes. Okay. So anyway, that was my very good friend Mimi, and she's amazing. So maybe we'll have her on here one day anyway. All right. So what was I saying? So yeah, grief. We're all grieving something, whether it be the loss of a loved one in my situation, COVID just taking away the fact that we can't, I love you too. You know, COVID has taken away the fact we can't hug people, we can't see family. Like, that's grief. Like, that's a form of grief. The loss of a relationship, a breakup, the loss of a pregnancy, the loss of a home. I mean, I live in California usually. There's wildfires every year that are just crazy, and they ruin people's homes, their lives, and things like that. They're grieving that. So there's just so much. I mean, you can grieve like the loss of an article of clothing. And I know that sounds maybe ridiculous, but if it's a really meaningful item or garment or piece of jewelry that someone, you know, meaningful gave to you for a very specific reason, and you lose it, like, you might grieve that piece of jewelry because of the sentiment and the story and the person who's attached to it. So I digress, and you'll notice if you guys tune in every week, I just talk and talk and talk. But grief it's just there. It's part of our lives. And what I wanted this Good Grief series to be is a way for me to invite. It won't always be me talking. I'm so sorry. I know you guys are like, I wanted to hear this girl talk every Sunday for half hour. But it's going to be me inviting really amazing, inspiring people, all of them. And there's a lot already. I mean, I can't believe this, but it's already booked through March. Every weekend in February and March is booked up, which is like super exciting to me. And it's all different types of people. So we have people who have experienced loss of a parent, like me, of course. There's somebody with a traumatic brain injury who, you know, has had to completely redevelop skills, repurpose their life. So there's that. There's somebody who had a late-term pregnancy loss. There is, I'm trying to think what else. Somebody just like who had a massive lifestyle and career change. I mean, there are so many different stories, and my hope is that they will inspire you guys, that you whoever, will connect and resonate with these people. And, you know, I'm sort of glad I took a lot of polls on this to see what day and time you would all be interested in seeing this. And I'm actually really glad that it's a Sunday night, because Sunday scaries are real. And while we don't all physically, I'm sure some of you guys do still physically go to work, a lot of us are working from home, and Sundays are just always a day where you're like, Monday, like I have to go back to work. I have to start being a real person again. I have to think about things. So now that this is going to be every Sunday evening and later in the day, if you live on the West Coast, I think this will just be a really great way to connect and be inspired by some of the people who have experienced hardship and have turned it into something really, really, really good. Again, like I've been inspired by it. That's partially the reason why I'm doing this, is that somebody else lit a little fire under my tush, and I was like, okay, well, I have to continue doing more and more good. So again, rambling on, but I'll start with my story and how I turned my grief into something good. So many of you know that I lost my dad. It's been about 6.5 years now, and he passed away from something called multiple myeloma, as well as amyloidosis. And multiple myeloma is a bone marrow cancer. I love you too. And yeah, it was really, you know, my dad, and I've never like gotten super deep into this. I sort of just say I started my business because my dad passed away and all of that. So my dad was, and you can probably tell if you followed me from pictures in my post, he was a big personality. He lived his life to the fullest. I mean, in fact, I honestly think if you would have asked him, if he would have said like, okay, this is it for me, I'm going to pass away, do I have any regrets? Aside from, yeah, maybe him missing out on if I ever get married, have kids, all of those types of things, big monumental moments in his family's life. Yeah, I think he would say, I regret the fact that I'm not going to be able to see that. But in terms of the things that he did with his life, I don't think that man had any regrets. He did whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. He was super inclusive. He invited everybody. And the reason I'm telling you all of this is because it will sort of play into how I got through the grief process. He had tons of friends. He made everyone feel like they were sort of the only one in the room. He connected with each one of them on a different level, whether it be about motorcycles or they flew those remote control planes or travel or whatever it was. He was a dentist. He had a dentist group that he had been friends with from like a zillion years. They all worked together in their first office. The point is that he was what a lot of people now I know called a Renaissance man. He was a big personality. He was loved by so many, and that became even more apparent when he got sick. So I will never forget my mom and dad calling me. We're the type of family that if something bad happens, we don't want to scare anyone until it's necessary. So I guess my dad had been having some tests done and they didn't want to tell me until they sort of knew the results. So I didn't really know anything was going on until one day my parents called me. Oh, God, I want to say it was in June of 2014 and said, my dad gets on the phone. I don't want you to worry. That's never a great way to start a conversation, Dad, or anyone, you guys. Like, I don't want you to worry. Of course, I'm already worried. So he says, I had to have a test done, and it came back that I have something called multiple myeloma. And I was like, what is that? And he's like, it's cancer. That's it. I don't even know what he said the rest of the conversation. It was like null and void. Cancer is the worst word you want to hear, especially when it comes to your parents. So I'm hysterically crying. He's like, Romy, it's fine. Don't worry. I'm going to be okay. It's super treatable. People live with this. It's fine. So I was like, okay, he's my dad. He's not going to lie to me. This is what it is. We're going to make the best of it. He's going to get great care. It's going to be fine. So fast forward. And let me tell you guys, my dad passed away at the end of September and he was diagnosed at the end of June. Yeah, it moved really quickly. So there was really no time to process all of it. All I know is that my dad was treated by somebody in South Florida, and then he also made an appointment up in Boston at Dana-Farber with one of the top myeloma specialists in the country. So they flew up there. He had this meeting with this doctor, and the doctor, I quote you, and I will never forget this, said, "You'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Something will get you long before this ever will." If one of the biggest doctors for multiple myeloma in the world tells you that something else is going to get you long before this is, that's what you're going to believe. He said, "You don't even need to start treatment yet. You're in very early stages of it, so we'll just keep an eye on it. It's going to be fine." Great. He came home from that trip. He was happy as a pig and you know what, and we were like, okay, this is going to be fine. And then in July, so part of the reason we knew my dad was sick, well, we actually didn't know he was sick, is he had lost a very significant amount of weight, but he was also on some weird fad diet. And he, in his mind, told himself, like, oh yeah, I'm losing all this weight because I'm taking these, like, I don't even know, some weird, like, coffee extract pills. No, that wasn't it. He was sick because he had cancer. So we end up going, my family had a home in Colorado for many years. It was a second home to me. I spent as much time there as I did in Florida, just because it was a lot easier for me to travel there than it was for me to fly all the way back to the East Coast. So I remember in July going to Colorado, and you know, my dad, he wasn't his usual self. He was so what ended up actually really causing him to pass was something called amyloidosis, which is its own disease, but it's a secondary disease to multiple myeloma. And it's very rare, and about 10 to 15% of people with myeloma develop amyloidosis. So it's already rare, and then a small percentage of people with myeloma, which is also rare, get this thing. So basically, amyloidosis is a protein, a bad protein, that sort of leaks from your bloodstream into your body, and it gets stuck. It's like a sticky protein, and it gets stuck to your organs, and it starts to cause organ damage. So a lot of times they'll see people with amyloidosis will develop heart murmurs, they'll develop GI issues, they'll develop a lot of skin issues, and that's what was happening to my dad. So his skin was becoming almost leathery, and I would joke that his legs looked like hypercolor. I don't know if you guys remember those hypercolor sweatshirts, but they were sort of starting to change colors, and his joints were getting really tight. So when I went to Colorado in that July, even though he had gotten a rave review from the doctor in Boston, and you know, myeloma is super treatable and all of that, he was just like, I remember I brought him hard salami and a baguette to make sandwiches because he loved that, and I made him the sandwich, and it was really, really hard for him to open his mouth all the way because his skin was starting to get really tight all over his body, and he wasn't able to open his mouth as much as he used to. And that was like nothing crazy, but it was something. And he was tired. He was just not his usual self. So it was still a great trip. I will never forget. Him and I drove. He took me to go on a hike. Hiking is part of this story. It became such a big part of my grieving process. Hiking got me through a lot. So it's sort of funny that the last really good day him and I spent together was him driving me to a hike in Aspen. He dropped me off. He went to meet a friend. Oh, and he wasn't like very hungry at this point. He just like, his appetite wasn't great. So he went to drop me off. I went on this hike, which was so hard, by the way, you guys, and I didn't bring enough water, and I was like, what is wrong with me? So anyway, go on the hike. I come back. I meet him in town at Paradise Bakery, which is this bakery that's been around for a zillion years, and they have really good ice cream. And he was sitting out front, and I'll never forget this, with a huge cone, just like chowing down. And it made me so happy because he wasn't really eating, and he was like there, he's like inhaling this ice cream. And I was like, yes, Dad, eat the ice cream. Because you assume like someone's hungry, they're feeling better. So we got in the car together. We drove home, like not on the highway. We did the side roads. It's just so beautiful there, and we just had a really nice time. And we were sitting out back, like on the side of our house, and him and I were just chatting, and he said something to me that I got really annoyed at the time. He's like, I don't think I'm going to be around for a long time. I said, Dad, what is wrong with you? I said, why would you even say that to me? I was like, I'm done with this conversation. Like, I got annoyed because, parents always put this guilt on you. Like, I don't know how long I'm going to be around, so you need to do this or this or this. So I sort of took it as that, and I went into the house, and I said to my mom, like, Dad's being ridiculous. Fast forward, he must have, in his, like, heart of all hearts, known something wasn't right. I mean, he was a dentist. He wasn't a doctor, but still, he went to dental school. He had to learn about biology and all of that kind of stuff. He knew something. So that was like the first sign. So he ended up having to fly back. This is sort of where things turned. He developed a heart murmur. And what we didn't know until after he had passed away is that when he went to his cardiologist, who my mom is still friendly with, he kind of broke down to him because my dad didn't say anything to anyone about being afraid of passing away. Like nobody, not my uncle, not my brother, not take care, nothing. It's like he didn't have time to process it, or to have that conversation with us was just too hard for him. And to be honest with you, I don't know how I would have actually said goodbye to him if he could have said it to me. So I'm kind of glad it didn't happen. But he apparently broke down to him and said, I'm going to die. And thinking about that, just like knowing that he was in there by himself and couldn't come to us to say that because he probably was more worried about us than himself, is just, a testament to who my dad was. So it's he ended up developing a heart murmur. They decided, like, okay, it's progressing, so we're going to put you on chemo. And it was a light chemo. It wasn't like, of course, chemo is chemo. Like, it's never going to make you feel good, but it wasn't an extreme kind that was going to totally lay him on his tush. So he starts the chemo, and his numbers were really doing well. He was feeling good. He called me one day. He was at his friend's house. He was drinking a milkshake. He was really into ice cream, apparently. So he was drinking a milkshake, and he's like, I'm doing great. I'm feeling great. And, yeah, everything seemed to be okay. And my friends would ask me, like, how's your dad doing? And I'm like, he's fine. And they're like, okay. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, as far as I know, like, this is treatable. He's fine. They tell me not to worry. And that's really what we all believed. Truthfully, my mom, my dad, my brother, like, we all believed this was going to be okay. So that was July, August, September. So my parents, my dad, like, continued to sort of just be. Nothing major happened. And then around, was it late? Right before, in August, my parents went, hi, Bubba. My parents went to Colorado, and now in hindsight, and there's a lot more my mom could tell you about, like, times they spent with friends and certain things she picked up on, but I wasn't around for it, and I was sort of, again, like, in the dark because nobody was telling me anything. They went to Colorado, and my dad got really, 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 really sick. But they thought it was from the chemo, which makes sense, just sick. So, that truthfully though was just sort of the beginning of the end. Nobody knew. I don't know if he knew or if he did know in his gut, and he decided, I want to spend as much time in Colorado, which was his happy place, as I can. We really have absolutely no idea. We'll never actually know. And so when they got home, my mom said they took him to the hospital in Colorado to get fluids and things like that. And then when they got back to Florida, which my mom to this day is like, I don't even know how we got him back to Florida. He was so sick. My mom said, Steve, you need to go to the hospital. And he's like, I'm fine. I'm fine. A day or two went by, not a lot of time. And he said to my mom, like, I need to go to the hospital. And for my dad to say I need to go to the hospital, something was wrong. So they send him to the local hospital. And one of my mom's friends, the cardiologist, who my dad also down to, basically said, like, you need to get him out of here. You need to get him down to Miami, to Sylvester, to University of Miami Hospital. So fortunately, we had amazing friends. And by the way, I didn't know about any of this, but we had amazing friends, and they were able to get my dad into Miami right away. They transfer him. Great. Now, that weekend, went to visit my best friend in Chicago. We had the best time, the best weekend. Everything was amazing. And then one day, I will never forget, we were in Madewell, and I called my mom, and she said, you know, your dad, we're in the hospital. Your dad's, you know, really sick. We think it's from the chemo, blah, 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 blah. And I just like broke down, because I didn't think he was going to pass away, but you just don't want to hear about your parent being sick like that in the hospital on chemo with cancer. Like, again, like, I really believed he was going to be okay, but it's still like, you don't want them suffering. You don't want them feeling that way. So I said I was going home anyway from Chicago. I was going to Florida because we had a very dear family friend's wedding, Labor Day weekend. So I was going home anyway. And I said to my mom, I am not going back to California until Dad is out of the hospital. Like, that's it. And she's like, whatever you want to do. So I remember I flew Southwest from Chicago to Florida, and I like looked out the window and I cried the entire flight. And when I landed, this is where it got bad. And this is where it gets real. My mom called me. She said, Rita, which is her best friend, is going to pick you up from the airport. I can't come and get you. We're at University of Miami with Dad, and you're going to meet us here. I said, what? Why can't you come get me? What's going on? She goes, it's complicated. Now, secondary to I have cancer, hearing it's complicated, it's not good. And I would go, what do you mean it's complicated? And she's like, it's complicated. The doctors are saying it's complicated. I have a nervous breakdown. So I get to the hospital, and my dad, well, he was on a medication that made him completely like out of it. It was a steroid that made him completely crazy, but we had to completely suit up, gowns, masks, everything to go into the room, and to ensure that we didn't have anything that could potentially get him even more sick, just because of his immune system at the time. And seeing somebody that you love that way is just something I try and block out. I don't talk about it that often. I don't think about it that often. It's a lot. But for the sake of this, I'll talk about it. Fortunately, a couple days later, he comes to, and he's back to his usual self. I mean, he was at this point, and it's really unbelievable. And any of you who have gone through a family member, a friend, someone you love, and witnessing them with cancer. Cancer is, excuse my language, Instagram, a fucked up disease and illness. What it does to perfectly healthy people, how it just rips the life from them slowly, and you just see it happening. But when you love somebody that much, and you're so desperate for them to be well, and your hope is so strong, you sort of just see past it. If I look at pictures now from when my dad is in the hospital, I say to myself, what was I thinking? Like, how could I have ever believed that he in that state was going to get better? But it's just whatever, it's like adrenaline. I don't know what takes over your body, but you can't, like, the negative, it's just, you don't allow it. You can't allow it for the person, for your family, for your mom, for your brother, for everyone. You just have to remain positive and believe that this person is going to get better. You have to will it to happen. And that's what I was doing. I'm sure everyone around us was like, oh, brother, these people are in denial. And yeah, we were in denial. But like, what are you going to do? You don't want to believe that somebody you love is about to die from cancer. No, especially when you found out like 2 months before. So that being said, he was in the ICU. It was really like up and down and up and down. He'd have a good day, he'd have a bad day. He'd have a good day, he'd have a bad day. But ultimately, they stabilized him to the point where he could go down to 1 floor below. So he's there for about a week. And he was back to, again, very sick. Like, in hindsight, looking back, he was very, very sick. But it was like when the iPhone was coming out, a new iPhone was coming out, and he was like pissed off that he wasn't going to be able to get it. And it was on the news, and he was like, shut up, I want to watch. Like, he was really into like frappuccinos from Starbucks because, of course, like we didn't eat, but there was a Starbucks in the hospital on the main level. So we would like get stuff from there and bring him up these like vanilla frappuccinos that he really liked. And yeah, we just spent quality time with him, and we were like, great, he's out of ICU. He's in a regular room. Like, he's on the up and up. And like, the goal at this point, not to get really medical, is like, we now understood from his doctors there, one of the hematology oncologists, who is honestly an angel from the heavens, and I still to this day keep in touch with him. His name is Dr. Hoffman. He took so much time with us. He was so patient with us. He was not like any other doctor I've ever met. He would chat with my mom and I as long as we needed him to. And I'm sure he knew the outcome was not good, but he wanted to make us feel as secure as we possibly could. And that was very, very helpful. He had a few doctors like that and a couple of nurses who were really, honestly, if I could find them today and send them another thank you note, I would, because they were beyond, like angels sent from the heavens. So yeah, so he's in the level down, and my dad, he wanted to come home, and that was it. And we were, in my mind, I was like, oh, he's coming home. Yes, he's coming home. Things are getting good. No, things were not good. This was bad. And again, in hindsight, had I known what I know now from the research that I've done and what I've learned, like, I'm going to say this, and again, I am not a doctor, I'm not an expert, I don't know everything or really anything, but when we hear the word hospice, it puts us in a tailspin, especially when you don't want to believe that the person that you love is going to pass away. But knowing what I know now and seeing what happened over the course of the next 2 weeks, I wish a million times that I would have brought my dad home, gotten him hospice, and just let him be comfortable in the house and pass when he was ready to pass, because we just didn't know. We didn't want him to go. We wanted to do everything we could, and it just prolonged the inevitable. And truthfully, like, it ended up torturing him. It tortured us. It wasn't good. So long story short, he came home from the hospital, which was a nightmare. He was home for 2 days. We had 24-hour nurses. One came during the day, one came at night. My mom and I went out. We had to get the hospital bed. There's a special chair that helps. It like reclines all the way, and it helps to get them to stand up. We had to get all of his medication. I literally at this point was a doctor. Like, I was a doctor. I knew everything. I explained something to one of his doctors, and she literally said, can you come with me to my medical, my residents, or whatever they're called when they're first, and she's like, and explain it to them because you understand it better than they do. Like, it's unbelievable what you learn. It's a blessing and it's a curse, because I have the worst health anxiety in the entire world, and I think a lot of it is because I just know far too much from what I've seen. So we get all this stuff. We have the nurses, we have the special pillows, we have the this, we have the that. We're trying to make him as comfortable as possible. And the nighttime one morning, the second morning, and we had people coming over. I mean, you guys, there's so much that went on. We had social workers that we were talking to. They sent people to check in on him. We had people. It was a nightmare. And again, like, at the time, I didn't think it was a nightmare. I was not happy. I was crying and throwing temper tantrums and screaming and hysterical and pulling over cars and slamming my fists on the steering wheel and saying, why is this happening? Like, this is not a joke. Like, I had to pull over one day. I was having a full-blown temper tantrum about why is this happening, but you just figured it out. So I had a whole list of like what each medication was, what it was for, when he got it, what we did with it, all of the things. There was just a lot to keep track of. And also, like, I wanted my mom, you know, she had enough going on. She was distraught. She was beside herself. She was sick to her stomach, as we all were. And yeah. So I went into his room. My mom and I were sleeping in the front room in the guest room, and my dad was in the master bedroom. And I went in one morning and I was like, Dad, And he said, yeah. I said, are you okay? He said, yeah, I'm okay. But it was like he was not there. I go into the other room. I said, Mom, we need to call 911. Something's not right. So we called the ambulance. They came and they took him back to the hospital, a different hospital now in Boca. And what I didn't mention is when he was in Miami, we were actually staying at one of my parents' very dear friends' houses in the neighborhood where I grew up because it was closer to Miami. And like they hosted us. We had friends in and out of the hospitals every single day. There was nothing that we could have needed or asked for because it was already there. Hi, you. Mwah. There was nothing we could have asked for. It was done before we could even think of it. And that's part of how we got through all of this. When all was said and done, we had a support system that was so unbelievable, driving all the way down to Miami, letting us sleep in their house, making sure we had food, making sure we were cared for, making sure, you know, calling in favors, doing whatever we could to make this situation as positive as it possibly could be. So he went back to the hospital and he was back in the ICU, and I mean, the waiting room was just packed every single day with family friends. I mean, there was not a second that we were alone. We had people like controlling my dad's room. My cousin was like, no more visitors. He needs to rest. My uncle, after hours one day, stayed in his room and just sat and watched him. And I mean, there were days, and I hate to say this, like I couldn't go into his room. It was too hard for me. It was exhausting. We weren't sleeping. They made us go home during like shift change. We would go home for a few minutes, an hour or two. We would come back. We were there first thing in the morning. It was right in between the Jewish holidays, and I'm Jewish, which they do say is the holiest time to pass is between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So my dad, of course, had to pick to go out on the highest of occasions. But, you know, it was just, it happened. September is my parents' anniversary. It's the high holidays. It's a shitstorm. It's my dad's anniversary. It's really a horrible time that he had to decide to pass away. But, you know, there's no good time. So went back to the hospital. A week of it, he was sort of with it. And then we got a call one night and they said that he had a really bad night and they had to intubate him, which you all probably know because of COVID. That is when they have to put the tube down your throat to breathe for you. And that's just not great. And we kept this, I want to talk about this nurse. Because you don't realize, okay, I'm not really talking about the grief portion of this, am I? So what you don't realize, and what I didn't realize while I was going through all of this, is that you actually are grieving the loss before it actually happens. And you're starting to accept it while all of this is going on. And the reason why I know that is because one day my mom and I, on one of those shift changes where we had to go home, her and I were sitting in the backyard, and she always said to everybody who was like, it's time, you have to just let him go. She said, you know, this is not my decision. It's our family's decision. It's, you know, up to not just myself, but Romy and Justin. And until they're ready to say enough is enough, we're going to keep doing what we need to do. So we were sitting outside one day and I said, my mom said, you know, yes, exactly. She said, you know, you tell me like when you're ready. And I said, I'm ready. I've accepted it. And God, to think that you've accepted that you're going to just let somebody you love go. It's insane. But you get to a point where you're so exhausted from being sad. You're so exhausted from watching them suffer. You're so exhausted from just all of it that you're like, that's it. I get it. I get what's going to happen. I see the writing on the wall. Like, it's okay. My brother wasn't there yet, which is interesting because he is also a dentist and he's much more scientific where I'm much more emotional. And you would have thought that he would have come to terms with it before I did, but you know, you just never know. Like grief and how this process works is very different for everybody. But we did have this one nurse. She was one of the nurses who was at our house for the 2 days, and she was let me tell you, I owe everything to this woman because she doesn't realize how much she did for me personally. I can't speak to my mom or my brother, but you know, it's really hard. You can't really be sad. Of course, you're sad to your family and to the people around you, but you can't really lean on them as hard as you want to because they're just going through so much as well. So this nurse, she kept me so calm. She knew probably as well what the outcome was going to be, but she was so positive. She was so calm. She was so there for us. She was so there for my dad. She became part of our family over those couple of weeks that he was in the hospital again. And she just really like allowed me to go through it, but in a very calm way because I have a lot of anxiety. And for me to have gone through this without just having full-blown panic attacks on the regular and been like medicated to not have a nervous breakdown was pretty impressive. But she just was there for us. She came to the hospital every day. She came to lunch with us. She just talked me through it because she had dealt with it. She knew kind of what to expect. And she was really, truly amazing. So I am forever grateful for her because she just made a situation that would have been a lot harder if she wasn't around. So I had, through this time, the anticipatory grief, as Sarah mentioned in the comments. I had amazing friends. I had people calling me constantly. I fortunately and unfortunately had friends who had experienced loss. So they sort of, you know, I had one of them tell me, "You're going to be okay." And I was like, no, but thank you. Because you don't want to believe that and you don't think it's true. But I did have such an amazing support system between friends from LA that I spoke to regularly. Friends, family friends, people who I've grown up with my entire life who are like family, grew up with their kids. They're like second parents, my parents' friends. We just had such a support system. It was nonstop. Like it was exhausting, but it was so necessary. I remember talking to my mom's friend Rita on the phone one day. I took a break from being inside the hospital and I just went out onto a bench. I sometimes just needed to get some fresh air and relax and take a second for myself. And I was talking to her and it was getting closer to what we knew was going to be the end. And I just said to her, like, I know I just said 5 seconds ago, I'm not going to be okay. But then I must have in a couple of days realized I'm going to be okay. You go through a lot. But I said, you know I'm going to be okay. I'm young. I have a life to live. I said, but I'm really, really, really worried about my mom. And so what people don't realize, and I've talked about this on other lives, is while I'm going to grieve the loss of my dad as like a physical person in my life, I'm also going to grieve the loss of my family, to an extent my mom, because she can't be what she was, or it's going to take time for her to bounce back. I am going to grieve the life that I knew, my childhood home, the vacations we went on. There's a lot that you're grieving that's not just the physical loss. It's everything that comes with it. And that's what I think a lot of people who haven't experienced loss don't realize is you're constantly just going through it because there's always going to be firsts, birthdays, anniversaries, trips, places you've been to, hearing a song, and it's always going to bring up memories. And so you're constantly just going to have to work through this grief. So I remember at that point being like, I'm going to be okay, but I'm worried about my mom. And this is my next thing that I'm going to have to deal with once my dad passes. So, yeah, my dad, he was on life support, and it was right in between the Jewish holidays, and all of the doctors who were Jewish were out on holiday. And so we sort of had to wait a little bit until everyone kind of resurfaced. And I will never forget, my mom and I woke up one day and my brother came through the front door, and he said, and we looked at him and we knew that he had gotten a call from the doctor that morning, and the doctor sort of said, like, it's time. So we go over to the hospital. He had had a really bad night. We don't really know what happened. And we decided, like, enough is enough. This isn't going to turn around. He's not going to get better. And we have to make the decision to let him go. So My aunt was there. There were a lot of people there. There were a lot of people in the lobby who all ended up going to our house and preparing our house with food and everything we would need. So when we came home many hours later that night, we came home to a house full of so much love, people who just genuinely loved our family and made our lives so easy in a time that was so impossible. So yeah, we made the decision. It was my aunt, my mom, my brother, and I, just the four of us. Fortunately, the hospital had a hospice within it. So once they removed all of the everything from him, he looked as peaceful as he looked better than he actually had looked in a long time. We're like, I said jokingly to my mom, I go, maybe we should just like start over, like say, oh, we changed our mind. Let's wheel him back into the ER. Just be like, he's not feeling well. Can you take a look? And then we'll just, because he looked so good. And we're like, how can this be happening? So they took him to hospice. I promised him that I would not let go of his hand until he passed, which was true. I literally, from the time that we wheeled him, I held his hand the whole way. I went in the elevator with him and the nurses, whoever helped. We took him upstairs. I did have to let go of his hand for a few minutes while they, set up his room and everything. We went back and we just sat in his room with him, and you would think it would be really morbid. And I was somebody growing up who was like petrified of funerals, petrified of like everything. Like I saw a hearse driving down the road, I started crying. It's like I didn't even know who was in it, if there was anyone in it. It's just like I didn't do well with death, loss, any of that kind of thing. And here I am in a room with my dad and my mom and my brother and my aunt, knowing what the outcome is. And it somehow felt very peaceful and nice, and not nice, but not as bad as I thought it was going to. So I don't remember the time frame. It's really hard to remember any of this. It was the afternoon, early afternoon. It takes a while for everything to kind of get going. But we were all sitting there for hours, just talking about him, talking to him, talking to each other, sharing stories, just celebrating him in this room. And they always say that a lot of times people don't like to pass when you're there. They sort of like to do it in private. They don't want to upset you. I don't know. I don't know if that's true. I sort of believe it, because what happened is that my mom got a phone call. So we were all a little bit distracted because she answered the phone and she was talking. And the next thing I know, I looked over to my dad and I said, "Oh, Mom." And I noticed that he wasn't taking as many breaths, and we all just kind of like stopped. And it was almost like when my mom was on the phone and we were distracted, it was like it gave him a second to just do what he needed to do for himself without us watching. And then that was it. He took one last breath. Like I saw it very vividly, and then he just completely relaxed. And it was like, what I'll say was the strangest thing, and I feel like this is just getting really morbid, and I apologize, but it was like he was very much there, and then as soon as he took that last breath, it was like his energy was just gone, and whoever was there was just like a carrier for his like energy, and his energy, like we feel it. So I don't know, like I am not one of these like woo people, but I don't know if like really like the energy leaves them and they're with you always. Like my brother could feel him in his office because my brother took over his practice. My mom and I, like we always talk about, get these dimes everywhere. When I went to Colorado this summer for the week, I felt closer to him there than I had felt being in Florida or California or anywhere. Like I felt like his presence was there. So you guys, it sucked. It was hard. It was horrible. I don't even want to think about it for longer than I need to. So we'll move on to how I dealt with everything. But that was it. That was it. We had the funeral, which was a whole other funny story. But that I don't think you guys really want. Hi, Mom. I don't think you want to even really hear the cemetery story. But let me tell you about the cemetery. That was a special situation. And my dad ended up getting a really nice spot in front of a waterfall or a fountain because they tried to do a bait and switch. Because they'll try and pull a fast one on you if you don't have anything planned. And my dad did not have anything planned because the man did not want to die. So that was funny. That gave us a good chuckle because we needed a good chuckle at that point. Okay, but grieving. We had Shiva, which was super overwhelming. I had some of my best friends from LA fly and surprise me and be there for me, which was something I'll never forget, and meant the world to me. We had people around, family around, friends around. We had so many people just there for us and for a long time. And I decided I was not going to go back to LA right away. I stayed for a month. My mom eventually was like, it's time. You have to go back to LA. You have to go back. But I sort of turned that month. It was a full-time job. I could have created a new career for myself, but I was essentially my mom's personal assistant. I had to change all of the bills into her name, do direct deposit for her. We had to send you don't realize all the things you have to do. You had to get the death certificate, send it everywhere so they didn't think you were trying to steal this man's identity. It was a lot. There was a lot to organize. My dad was maybe not the most organized person. Like, he told my mom where bits and things. He used to joke, like, if anything ever happens to me, call so-and-so. Well, guess what? We called so-and-so and sort of worked our way from there. So I spent the whole month home organizing everything for her and spent a lot of time with family, a lot of time with friends. I could really go on and on. I feel like it's already been almost an hour. Okay, I need to get to the point here. Okay, so my dad passed away. It sucked. I just walked you through the whole thing. If you guys ever want to learn anything more about any of that, feel free to message me. I can go into more depth on a different day. But what I really want to talk about is how Sincerely came to be, how I've sort of grieved the whole process, how I get through what's not the easiest thing to get through. So I came back to LA. I worked in fashion, in styling for a really long time. It was an exhausting job. It was a great job. I got to meet a lot of people and travel a lot of amazing places, but it was a little bit of like, you might have a nervous breakdown from like the hours you had to work. So I decided I'm done. Like, I have too much stress from my dad passing away, from what I just went through. Like, I don't need to have an unstable career at the moment. So I sort of gave that up. I got a new job, and in the midst of all of this, my dad passed away September 29th, and my mom's birthday is February 12th. So it's coming up. We just made dinner reservations for outside, because in Florida you can go outside and they set the tables up so far apart. So we're gonna go. She already will have had her second vaccine. So we're gonna celebrate the lady's birthday. So February 12th, and I was like, what do you get somebody for their birthday when they just lost, like, this is not going to be a fun birthday for her. So I was like, I want to turn my dad's signature into a diamond necklace. Sounded like a good idea. So one of my dad's very close friends at the time was a jeweler. I called him and I was like, because we had found my dad's stamp that he used in the office for like checks and prescriptions and things like that. So I had that and I was like, ooh, let's do something with this. So I asked him if he could do it and he's like, yeah. So he made it and it was amazing. It was this, but a little different. Like, it's gotten better over time because we've perfected it, but it was this. And I gave it to my mom for her birthday and she flipped out and was obsessed. And to this day, she like plays with it and touches it because it's like, she just feels like my dad is there. And family and friends sort of started asking about it, and we made a couple for people we knew, and that was sort of the end of it. Like, I never intended to turn it into a real business, and I've always wanted to have my own business, but you know, it's hard to actually find something that you can really do and, you know, earn a living from that you're gonna love. So a few, you know, months after, I was like, you know what? Like, this is something I really love. Like, the response has been great. Like, I have somebody who can manufacture for me. Let's like set up a website and let me try and see how this goes. Little did I know that while I was loving making the jewelry, and I still, like, I love making the jewelry, and I've learned so much about diamonds and golds and casting and setting and all the things that go into making the pieces that I make for you. What I didn't realize is that I was going to meet so many amazing people. And I mean that wholeheartedly. Like, I love the people that I make pieces for. Like, it has been nothing but a positive experience. I have had no unruly customers. People are like, I know I'm being a pain in the ass. I'm like, you are hardly a pain in the ass. Like, nothing gives me more pleasure than doing this for you. And like I said earlier on, I built this small community of people, a lot who have experienced loss, unfortunately. And while Sincerely is a jewelry brand first and foremost, it's also something that just allows me to connect at a time where it's really difficult to connect with people because of COVID and what it's stopped us from being able to do. And it just allows me to consistently connect with new people who have incredible stories, who, you know, I wouldn't have met otherwise. And so it's now been, like, really, it's been 6 years that I've been doing this, because it was right after my dad passed that I made the first one. But it's been like just over 4 years that I've actually been pursuing it as a real career. Also, a lot of you guys probably don't know this, but I also, most of this, have had another, aw, I love that one too. We dotted the I with a little diamond. It's so pretty. But I've had for a long time during the 4 years, had another like full-time job. So that brings me to the inspirational part of this. I know a lot of people, you know, want to start businesses, but they don't know how. You can do it. You can have like 5 jobs. It's not fun necessarily, but you do what you have to do. And like, Sincerely, while I love it, and it was something that I wanted to pursue, 4 years ago, there was no way that I could just like quit a job and like start making jewelry. You know, now it's at the point where I can really just focus on this exclusively. And that makes me really, really excited. Yeah, it's crazy to think that like all of the craziness that has come from the last 6 years, including my dad passing and having changes in careers and full-time jobs while building Sincerely and all of that, like, here I am, and I'm okay. Believe it or not every day am I okay. I still have really horrible anxiety, and COVID has not made it any better, but for the most part, you know, I got through it because I came back to LA. I had a phenomenal group of friends who picked me up and were there for me and never let me be alone. I'm forever grateful to all of my friends because of that. Thank you. Wow. Me and You Grazing LA, you guys who just commented, check out her Instagram, because I found her through a mutual friend, and she makes these beautiful grazing boxes. And not only that, she's very, very sweet. So you're inspiring to me. How do you like that? But yeah, I just had an incredible group of people to support me. I changed careers. I started doing things that I genuinely loved. I sort of cut people out. I know that sounds horrible. There was just like, I didn't have the patience for like pettiness at that time. There were certain things, there were certain things I just couldn't listen to. I couldn't put up with. And it wasn't necessarily like a permanent thing. Some of it was, but some of it I just needed space. You just have to sort of be a little bit selfish and do what you need to do. You know, I came home, I saw my mom often. I cried a lot. I missed my dad. I couldn't believe that this had happened. I didn't know how I was going to like go on. I would feel sick. And then over the years, every year, you believe it or not, you get less sad. I don't know if that makes sense. Like you live to learn with it. A friend of mine wrote me an email called The New Normal afterwards, and it was sort of, he had experienced a loss, and he sort of just said, this is what you're going to go through, and this is what you need to do for yourself, and it's never going to be the same. It's going to be new. It's going to be your new normal, but your new normal will be okay. And my new normal is okay. It's different. A lot of amazing things have happened for myself, for my brother, for my mom. Our lives are very, very different than what they used to be and what they would have been had my dad still been alive. And I do every single day wish that my old life still existed. Okay. You know, I miss my old life a lot. I miss the things and the trips and all the family things. And I know my mom's probably hysterically crying right now. All the things that we would have been doing and celebrating if my dad was still here, but that's just not those are not the cards that we were dealt, and that's fine. You know, I met my boyfriend. We've been together for 4 years. He didn't get to meet my dad, which breaks my heart, but I know my dad would have loved him and he would have thought my dad was a character. But maybe my dad was like, it's time, Romy, we're going to send you somebody. So here you go. So you never know. Yeah, and I have Sincerely. I mean, Sincerely is it, you know, it's like I don't have a choice. Sincerely is really the only way that I can keep my dad's tangible memory alive, because it's so inspired by him and his handwriting and his signature. That's what started it all. So this company, it's all about him. And that's why it's allowed me to get through, you know, this really hard time a little bit more easily than maybe it would have, because instead of forgetting about him or pushing it to the side or not thinking about it or not talking about it, I've chosen, and again, you guys, please, everybody is very different. Some people don't like to talk about it. I happen to be very open about it, and that's fine. Like, if you're not comfortable talking about it, you should not talk about it. If you're comfortable talking about it, you should. It's very different. Some people will be receptive. Some people will think it's too much. You're going to make some people uncomfortable. It's going to be a whole thing. But I don't know what I was just saying. I lost my train of thought. Oh God, Mimi. But at the end of the day, I grieve, and it helps me a lot to be open about my dad, to share stories about him, to sort of live my life the way that I think he would have wanted me to. And also, like, my dad was just like a very hardworking guy. He was good at what he did, and I wanted to also do something that I worked really hard for, and Sincerely is that. I've been working hard for a really long time, so I'm grateful that Sincerely has actually turned into something, and it wasn't just like an idea that flopped in the first year and I was like, oopsie. But I think my dad would have been really, really proud of what I accomplished. And I like to think that he comes to visit and checks in every while and every so often, and he's part of every single piece of jewelry I make. And yeah, he just lives on. And to me, like, as hard as it will be and as hard as it gets and as hard as some days are, like, I know that it's okay. Like, I know that I'll be okay, my mom is okay, my brother's okay, and that we are a lot stronger than we think that we are, because we had no choice but to be strong. So I don't know that I really talked about how I grieve so much. I probably told you the story of my dad more than anything. But yeah, I just do what you need to do for yourself. Take time, say yes to things you wouldn't have necessarily said yes to. Talk about the person, don't talk about the person. Go out, stay in bed. Do whatever you need to do. If the time, I mean, you should always be a little bit selfish, but if you're ever going to be selfish, this is the time to be selfish. Just do what you need to do. Like, nobody should be unhappy. And if you're having a hard time and people don't understand that, like, I'm sorry, then that's their problem. Like, I don't mean to sound difficult, but that's their problem. Like, it's not yours. So that being said, I'm going to wrap it up. If you guys have any questions, if you're not comfortable talking on here, or if you want to talk offline, or you want me to like focus on any specific topics moving forward, like, just shoot me a little message and I'll promise you I'll respond. It's not like I get that many DMs. But more importantly, we're going to do this every week. It's going to be a little bit different. It's not going to just be one person rambling on and on and on. We're going to have guests. Like I said, the guests are, honestly, you guys, all of them are amazing. It's no like big names. Right now it's a lot of real people that I know, people who I've like grown up with or become close with over, you know, Instagram from Sincerely. It's a lot of really, really good quality people who will inspire you and make you, if you're having a bad day, you're going to be like, well, shit, if they can do what they did, then I can certainly do what I need to do. So I hope that this series inspires you to turn whatever hard times you're having, and you're entitled to those hard times. I do hope that this series and these episodes and these guests do inspire you to do something to make yourself a little bit better, feel a little bit better, all those things. So that being said, it's 8 o'clock. I didn't finish my Chinese food, so I'm going to go finish that now, and I'm going to watch some TV. And then, yeah, I will see you all maybe over the course of the week, but I will see you all next Sunday, 4 p.m. Pacific and 7 p.m. Eastern Standard. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'm going to try and save this and do all the things that you're supposed to do. All right. Mwah. Good night.